Hello and welcome to Diction Analysis. The whole goal of this lesson is to look at the free response question style number 2. This is all surrounding rhetorical analysis. The skills you learn here, though, can still be effective on our synthesis writing style and your argumentation writing style, because should you have control over your own language, you can further any form of writing that you have. Now, before we start, what I would like you to have is make sure you have this worksheet in front of you, the one I printed. It has all of the same notes that we're going to be discussing. However, I added different features throughout the PowerPoint, and you can make sure that you write the notes on this handout. This handout is able to be used on timed writes for a short while during the fall semester. So again, you just want to have this out so that while we are working our way through the PowerPoint, you yourself can add any notes that would make you feel a little more secure. So without further ado, let's check out diction analysis. Now, this is Holy's rhetorical framework diagram, and again, the whole idea of this framework is to allow you, as the writer, to address the 3 questions that are on that right-hand margin. We have to first by analyzing how a piece is structured. So that's where you get your diction, syntax, imagery, and figurative language. But again, all of these are dependent on how I organize or structure. This is all surface. This is what we see when we just look. It's how it was made. When we go up to the next level, we're looking at what is being effective and what is furthering our discussions. And so that's where we see our appeals. And tone, of course, is part of that. How you sound does help to convey and lessen. And finally, the big one that you'll be answering is why. So, exigence, the reason the piece even exists, my occasion, who it was intended for, my audience, and finally that main ultimate goal, the purpose. All of these are connected into one big gigantic framework. And essentially, again, this is just SOAP's model. So if you analyze and annotate for SOAPs prior to any writing assignment, you should have no problems. So let's start with what is diction. It is at the very core word choice. The general character of a language used by an author, that right there, that second bullet point, that is going to be your fancier definition, if you will. But when I'm analyzing diction, I'm looking at the words, I'm using the language, and that's what I'm choosing to examine. Now, diction can have 3 levels of efficiency. The first one is appearance. How does the word appear to you? This is not looking at what it means. This is not looking at how it is pronounced. It is just looking at the word and using your observation of what the word looks like to help determine something. Now, the next level is sound, so how we pronunciate it, how it comes across per region. This is not just how one person says it versus another. We take into dialect as well. And finally, we also look at meaning. And when we examine meaning, there are 3 different ways. First one is who uses this word. If that word is incredibly elevated, you might not hear the common man say it. And with that, that of course is going to help you structure and look back at your Holy framework. Where is the word even used? And finally, why is the word used? Why do we even have this word in existence? So we have 3 levels of articulation, and you can see right up here on my top bar I have a start of a chart going. So I have non-standard language, I have informal standard language, and formal literate language. Think about your 3 levels of efficiency: appearance, sound, and meaning. Now, if I'm in the formal literate category, most of the words will appear, sound, and have a higher elevated meaning. If I'm in that non-standard language, that's where we'll hear vulgarity, you'll hear just specific jargon. The appearance, the sound, and the meaning is going to be over here. It always matches the category that it falls under. So let's break these 3 down, because aside from looking at the appearance, the sound, and the meaning, you have to be able to determine where it falls in that category. So, non-standard language, you'll see I have 5 different types of non-standard language. The first one is vulgarity, and you can see it's pretty basic, pretty obvious. It's something that's going to lack refinement. It's going to be very coarse. It will have cursing. Non-standard language does not mean that the whole piece is non-standard. You might have elements of non-standard language. But in an analysis, you're not going to say the author implements non-standard language. You will go directly to the type of language we're looking at. The next one is slang. So something like chick or dude, these are the humor exaggerated phrases. The next term is colloquial. It's regional language. So this is again going all the way back to appearance, sound, and meaning. This really has that enunciation where we have to think about region. So you all here in Arizona is not going to be you all in every place in America. It turns into y'all at times. Jargon, again, specific language. So the example chip, byte, spelled with a Y, CPU, they're all things that you would hear in a computer field, just like if you heard actor, curtain call, that would be theater, or if I heard lawyer, judge, jury, those are going to be obviously legal based. Cliche is my final type. Now the cliche is something that you see in almost any type of writing. You guys write cliches, I speak in cliches. We do this because it's so easy to grasp. So it's that figurative language that's just, it's not as clear anymore. It's not as engaging as something that we could have said otherwise. So the example, bigger and better, jump for joy, quick as a flash. It's just those phrases that you hear and you grew up with. As you move into this, from when we're looking at non-standard, before we move over, non-standard language, this left-hand column, again, you're not going to have an entire piece and analyze it as slang or an entire piece as colloquial. This is just, should the text shift? Think back to the things they carried. Go all the way back to the summer reading. When you think about the things they carried, there was a lot of vulgarity in it, but it wasn't by Tim O'Brien. It was about other characters or how he felt while he was in war. So this was just a moment, a non-standard shift into a language that wasn't matching than usual. Now, the informal standard language, this is how you speak. This is how you talk to me. So it's language that is grammatically correct, but it's conversational. It's designed for talking to one another and just getting your points kind of across. Now the final one, this is the one we will always analyze within language or any timed right, unless there's a moment where you have to jump over here and kind of talk about vulgarity or slang or colloquialism or jargon or cliches. We analyze literate, and the reason is it's language that is appropriate for more formal occasions and it's abstract. It allows you to have a bigger meaning, a bigger function, if you will. So before we analyze the types of diction, let's get to the basics. With AP Language, you have to understand something. It is not 1-2 honors or 3-4 honors, and most of the things I teach you here will not translate to AP Lit. Lit and language are two very different things. Mr. Sable and I, it's not that we don't want to teach the same thing or have skills build upon one another. It's just what I do and my end result is very different from his. So, the first one, don't be the person who examines all the types of diction possible. Choose one and stick with it. So on the summer assignments, I saw a few people who would like, it has abstract, it also has some concrete words, some objective and subjective, and now you have 4 types of diction that require 4 different analysis that all link to a major goal. That's a lot more than you can handle in a summer assignment, let alone a 40-minute time window. Now, the example that I'm going to use is the contradiction. The things they carried, it did contradict itself, and it did so on purpose. There were times where he was objectively telling us his story, and he would just detail the facts, but it was overlaid with his subjective meaning. And so, should that happen, yes, you can analyze it, but always keep in mind you have to be able to explain both. You don't want to list 16 types of diction. You just want to have maybe 1 guaranteed, 2 if it is required. And when I say required, I mean it's required to make your point more effective. It's not required by me or College Board. Second one, please realize there is no right or wrong answer. There are only strong and weak analytical points. Everyone has an ability to do amazing on a timed right. However, if you go into this saying, I'm not going to do well, yeah, you are creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. And at the same time, you can't come to me saying, is abstract diction the right answer? Because I probably could analyze it as concrete diction because my background, being older than you, seeing different things than you, living a totally different life than you, I might see it more concretely, while you in a different generation might be more abstract and more impressed with some of the philosophical ideas that I just don't see. So again, no right or wrong. You just have to make the answer work for you. And finally, whatever you say, you have to back it up with evidence that you fully explain. You cannot just say, it is this and I am done. You have to say, it is this for the following reasons, or this is how I got there. You have to walk me through your answer. So let's talk about our types of diction. Here's our types, my big giant chart that's also on your handout. So let's start with the first. You're going to see that it's type of diction versus another type of diction. Now the big thing here, that doesn't mean when I'm going to analyze, I'm going to say it's literal and figurative. It's one or the other. These are just the exact opposite. So I start with euphonious. It's a pleasant sounding, something like the word pillow. There's nothing bad about pillows. The sound of it, the appearance of it, it's soft, it has good memories linked to it, the connotation's always really nice. On the other hand, we're going to have a cacophony going on, and it's going to be more harsh. It'll have an awkward sounding. Phrases like buzz, or the example on your worksheet is awkward. Awkward, the word itself, the meaning implies a sense of awkwardness. For lack of a better term, the word itself is awkward. Awkward is awkward. Now, my next level is literal and figurative. Literal is the language is not embellished. The facts are just very present, very clear. On the other hand, you have figurative, where I'm trying to get a pictorial effect. I want the picture. So the example on your worksheet, literal, I would call someone frugal. But on the other hand, if I wanted to be a little bit more dramatic, I would maybe say that the old man is tight as bark on a tree. It's a little extreme, but it's designed to create that picture. My next level, denotative versus connotative, which should be very easy for you to analyze. Denotative is my dictionary, it's my exact word, whereas connotative has that cultural suggested meaning. The example on your worksheet, we'll start with the basic. If I call something a dress, if I just say that's a beautiful dress, I am literally and denotatively going straight for the item that you were wearing. On the other hand, I could call it a gown, because not every dress is the same. Some dresses are nicer, and when it's a nicer dress, we do want to call it a gown. Your next level is objective versus subjective. Objective is when it's impersonal, there's no bias, it is as direct as we can get. The subjective has bias, there's emotion, the author is guiding you. Generally speaking, we're going to see objective more with like newspaper articles, but even then it can't be an opinion editorial. Subjective tends to be where you're always going to go on this realm, because everyone has an agenda. Everyone uses language with an agenda. So an example would be like thinking of one. We'll come back to it. Never mind. Let's move on to active and passive. Active is when it states action. So those students made progress. The action is that they made their progress. Whereas passive would be states the being. Progress was made by the students. So this is when I want to hide something. I don't want to say what progress was made. I don't want to say how much progress. I just want you to know progress was made. Concrete versus abstract. Concrete is that specific idea. So like a girl or a flag, we all know what a girl is or what a flag is. Whereas abstract, we go into that conceptual, bigger meaning. So instead of saying a girl, I might just talk about beauty. Instead of a flag, I'm going to talk about patriotism, because now the connotations are much more open. The next two is hyperbolic or understated. So one is deliberately misrepresenting itself. The example on your worksheet is pretty common. The shot heard round the world. Obviously, we did not hear the shot all around the world. While understated is when I'm misrepresenting something as less. So if someone comes to you and says, you're doing a great job, thank you so much for helping, you kind of play it down and, I was only doing my job, no worries, sort of deal. Pedestrian versus pedantic. Now, there's a star over here by my pedestrian. Pedestrian is the most common type of diction used on the AP language exam, but that doesn't mean it's the only type. Pedantic is when it's inflated to display importance. So instead of saying that you're cool, like I would with pedestrian, I would maybe say you're suave. You're just elevating the word choice to be a little over the top. Now, a word to the wise. Never are you allowed to say on a timed right or with me as much as you can, help it. The author uses diction. Let me translate this. The author uses words. Yes, absolutely. The author is using words. If there were no words, we wouldn't be reading. So that's just one of those ridiculous phrases that we want to pull from our writing. And you are never allowed to say that the author uses a lot of diction, because then an author is just using a lot of words. Also, whenever you use the word diction or even tone, you have to accompany it with an adjective to describe its type of diction and its purpose. So you can't just say that the author uses diction. You have to say the author is using concrete diction or subjective diction, or the tone is depressing. Keep those really at bay. Don't ever lose track of what your main goal is. So let's kind of wrap it all up. Let's look at our hints for success. Your first one, don't list and label. What this means is don't just say that there is this type of diction and this type of tone and then provide me an example. What you've done is I've listed you and I've labeled this example, but I didn't analyze it. You have to analyze and explain everything. Next one, separate the following. You cannot treat purpose the same as tone or as attitude. They are all three separate ideas. So make sure you go into your writing knowing what the purpose is, knowing what the author's tone is, knowing what my speaker's attitude is, because again, speaker and writer might be two separate entities. Read the passage several times. Don't just read it one time and assume you know the right answer. In fact, I would rather you annotate, and that means not just highlighting or underlining, actually making comments. Not making the page bleed, but making comments. And write a quick summary synopsis. Once you've read something, actually go through, read, or write what just happened. Your brain actually might trigger and remember more than you rationalized, and then you might feel more in control, which gives you a bigger chance for success. The next one, choose true and accurate descriptors. Don't just use those big 50-cent words that you guys have learned either with me or your previous language arts teachers. I don't need expansive vocabulary for you to earn a 9. I need really solid analysis. That's where I'm going to go. Big words don't always mean best ideas. And let's see here. Next one, diction can use other elements of figurative language. So if, and think about it, we have figurative diction, you're probably going to want to discuss figurative language, imagery, other factors. But again, keep that diction separate, but still use other elements to embellish your analysis. And finally, go beyond those superficial ideas. Don't just stick with a safe thing. The phrase high risk, high reward does matter. Now, high risk does also mean that maybe you're not going to have a high reward, but going beyond the everyday tried and true answer might give you a lot more in terms of what you learn than anything else I could provide you in this classroom. Now, power verbs. On the back of your handout, you should see a list of power verbs. And the idea here is I don't want you to use one specific word. I want stronger verbs. I want you to say that the writer is qualifying their claim, or that he is juxtaposing one idea from another. I don't want you to use the phrase use, because use is the weakest verb you can think of. Everyone writes it. The author uses, the author uses, the author shows. That's another really common one. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and make the joke now. Just because you cannot use, let's go back to that whole fancy word discussion. You also cannot use the word utilize. Okay, so just be really careful on that one. Now the handout, again, much like I said, you are actually able to use this handout on your timed writes for a short while. Don't become reliant on it though, because eventually I do have to pull it from you. Not saying that you're not allowed to use your notes, but when you get on a college board test, you're not going to have that with you. So just use it, but start really learning these terms. I would recommend making a flashcard, and one of the things I would do is when you read anything, ask yourself what type of words, how would you analyze it? What type of word choice would you define it as? You just doing these small basic steps actually does further your ability to analyze. Now, having said that, that is the whole presentation on diction. When you come into class tomorrow, we'll have a 1-question quiz, different for every class period. And if you've been watching and you've been taking notes, this should be the easiest quiz of your life. However, if you haven't really watched, you just had it in the background, maybe turn it back on, watch for just a little bit, give it a little more attention. We'll also be doing some practice and application tomorrow, so hopefully you feel a little bit more confident and you understand this, and by the end of our class practice and application, you feel even more prepared than you were in any of your other classes. Have a great night, and I'll see you guys later.